this and getting down into it. It was a blessing just to know that we're not the only ones that got interrupted in life and in their journeys. So we're going to read about Paul and his trip and different things of him spreading the gospel and what he faced and different things of God's plan. The point is God may interrupt us to move our ministry in a new direction, and that'll be highlighted in several different passages that we're going to read today. When have you questioned following the recommendations of your GPS? I know I have before. Definitely traveling. I'm just like, I'm the one that likes to put it in even though I know where I'm going, just in case. And sometimes it's like, I don't remember that. Whatever the case may be, it might change or something. I start second, guessing it. Have y'all ever questioned your GPS before?
I like it when it takes you in a complete circle all the way around to bring you back to turn off where you've done passed.
Exactly. Sometimes it takes the longer route, and I tell my wife a lot that there may be a reason that it did that. God may have made that happen or had all that do that just because you may have missed an accident, or what could you have avoided, or what could have happened.
Or an unexpected joy.
Yeah.
I remember when your wedding reception, the GPS, what it did to you.
Oh, I know it. Yes. And when me and my wife got married, their family took a back road apparently and went off the backside of Flat Rock. And if y'all don't know that, it's like a one-lane dirt road and some sharp curves there. And they ended up running off the side of the road the day before we got married, and kind of freaked my wife out just a little bit. And it was just like, well, I was like, I guess this is meant to be. I reckon. It just kind of stressful in the whole ordeal, the situation, but eventually everybody was fine. Nobody was hurt. No vehicles were hurt or anything.
I remember one time Gail and I was on vacation. We was taking a bus trip, but the bus driver went off on a side road following his GPS.
Oh boy.
And he'd like to never got that thing off that road because there's no place to turn around.
Oh man.
And it delayed us. We got really, it was half an hour to an hour. It was a long delay. But he finally figured it out.
It's crazy. The things are supposed to help you, but sometimes they're a pain in the butt sometimes. We'll get into it. Here, where the Bible meets life here, it says in May of 21 of 2020, a couple people there, they started a journey across America on foot. They started the San Francisco Gate Bridge, and they ended up in New York. And this is kind of a good example of what's going to go into and compared to Paul's journey. Is they traveled across the whole America, and it took 800 miles to do it. And they started in May, and they ended up in New Year's Eve on the Brooklyn Bridge in New York. And I thought that was kind of really cool. I think about what all could they have faced in the journey there, in the whole several months span, and then also that 800 miles of traffic on I-80 it says, and then you've got different weather from out west to here, and all of course the different times of the year, and it says in here, compare that to Paul's and his companions' trip. They would have to do that 2.5 more times to get to where Paul and his companions traveled. They traveled 10,000 miles, and they were just pioneer missionaries. You got to think that was a long time ago, and there weren't no GPS. They didn't have no road maps, no nothing, nowhere to go or anything. They just, let the Lord guide them. And what Paul faced too, I think, was a lot much worse than maybe what these two fellows did. Paul faced prison sentence. People wanted to murder him just for spreading the gospel. What do you think what do you do when the ministry God has blessed is cut short or ended? Anybody want to take a stab at that? What do you do when the ministry God has blessed is cut short or ended? I feel oftentimes maybe we think and say, why, maybe? Why, in the not see the actual reason why, but maybe, you know, there is ultimately a reason of why God's maybe has closed that door at one time, maybe open up a new door. Maybe it's not instant, but, you know, years or maybe months or whenever down the road, you'll eventually see why that was either cut short or ended.
We need to have faith, be strong enough to know that God is not going to direct us somewhere He doesn't want us to go.
Exactly.
That we need to follow His plan and not ours.
Exactly.
I immediately thought of Charlie Kirk Ministry, you know, what he was doing, and, you know, it was cut short as it was, but look how it has evolved, and how many young people are coming to the Lord.
Yeah,
Because of the sins.
I definitely have seen that over the course of the several months. I mean, you think, yeah, his ministry was, you know, him himself leading the ministry was cut short, but ultimately it started a fire in the younger youth and people that maybe have strayed away and now it's come back. And I mean, at the beginning, you know, they may have not have seen that, and then ultimately God's opened up another door there, just like, wow, this is more than what we had even thought of. We'll go ahead and get into the first set of verses. It's Acts chapter 16, verses 4 through 5. And it says, as they went through the cities, they delivered them the decree to keep that were ordained of the apostles and elders which were at Jerusalem. And so were the churches established in faith and increased in numbers daily. See, this is a new journey for Paul and some others that he's going to team up with. I mean, 5 years had passed earlier in Acts of him going through another journey with Barnabas, and they had already did their first missionary there, trying to spread the gospel and to start churches and to really spread the knowledge of Jesus and that. But back in the first journey, when it was Paul and Barnabas, they took the gospel to Cyprus and across southern part of Galatia, which is now modern day Turkey. They would, like I said, start synagogues, proclaiming the gospel to Jews first, and then the Gentiles. They discipled the new believers and started churches for both the Jewish and the Gentile members. And I think it's a big ask and a big task for them to do. I couldn't imagine, going through towns that maybe not have even heard of the gospel and starting a church and spreading the news, and the two missionaries then, after they had got through their trip, they had reported back to Antioch and recounting their progress with what they were supposed to do, and they continued their journey and about what they had done, what they had faced. Like I said, 3 years before, Paul had preached the gospel, and they tried to murder him. So I mean, he's come in back, to spread the news and spread the gospel, and he's seeing everything kind of take hold, and then actually taking a hold of what they had spread before. And I mean, it's a big change of what Paul had faced beforehand, 5 years prior. He's faced a lot of ridicule, I do believe, and just a lot of different things. Like it says here, returning to Lystra, in the second mission trip, Paul discovered that the gospel had seed sown in hard soil, not only taken root, but had borne generational fruit. That's what I was saying. I mean, who knows what he had thought was going to happen after he had left there the first trip, and to see, what he had thought was going to happen. I mean, if I was somewhere and thought, I was trying to spread the gospel, and then was threatened and, somebody tried to murder me, I don't know what I would thought of, is this even gonna, take? Are they gonna, even listen to whatever I have to say? I mean, that's what I would think. I mean, what do y'all think Paul thought, about all that when he come back and and seen what had, took place, and that everybody's kind of took a hold of that. What do y'all think?
He had to have a strong faith in God that he would protect him. But he was the one that was to spread the gospel to the Gentiles. That's who was chosen for that.
It says here that he met up with Timothy, and he was very impressed with how Timothy was, and he actually invited Timothy to be kind of a mentor to teach Timothy and go around and also be on this journey with them to spread the gospel. And we'll get into some other verses here that you will see on their mission and how it came to be. Here's a good quote in the book. The truth is that God can do anything He pleases through an ordinary person who is fully dedicated to Him. And that was preacher Henry Blackaby that said that. And I think that's obviously 100% true. I think that God can literally pick up anybody in this world and choose a task for them to do, and that task may not, be so easy, and who knows who it'll affect, and what kind of change can take place with it. I just think it was kind of amazing to see the whole aspect of Paul and him going over and all the stuff he has faced to get where he's at and spread it. Does anybody have anything they'd like to add or any comments about the first set of verses there?
Curtis, on that question too there, it says, when has God given our church a season of fruitful ministry?
Mm-hmm.
I think every season is a season of fruitful ministry.
I think so
If
too.
the church is doing the work of God, every season is fruitful ministry.
One thing I thought of when I read that is I think of either like the revival or a vacation Bible school. I mean, you see all the youth, these younger ones that, it's harder nowadays for the younger ones to learn about, the gospel, about Jesus, and I mean, and it all depends on, I think, parents too, and also ultimately, they ain't being taught in the school system at all. I mean, it's ultimately going to come down to the willingness of the parents or the willingness of even the youth who want to come in the door of the church and sit down and actually learn and even just get into the Bible. I mean, it's almost like, not forbidden, but it's almost kind of like just turned off in the public society and the school system. I mean, they don't discourage it, but they also don't, promote it either. And I think that's a big thing that whenever we do the vacation Bible school and also the revival, I think that's a big fruitful ministry, just the lives that each life that gets touched. We'll scroll over to our next set of verses. It'll be Acts chapter 16, verses 6 through 10. It says, "Now when they had gone through Phrygia and the region of Galatia, I think it's Galatia, and were forbidden of the Holy Ghost to preach the word in Asia, and were not come to Mysia, they essayed to go in Bithynia, but the Spirit suffered them not. And as they passing by Mysia came down to Troas, and vision appeared to Paul in the night, there stood a man in Macedonia, and praying to him, saying, Come over into Macedonia and help us. And after he had seen the vision, immediately were endeavored to go into Macedonia, assured gathering that the Lord had called us to preach the gospel unto them." And I see this as reading this, I was kind of hung up on the aspect of where they were not to preach the word in Asia, and I was like, I didn't really kind of understood that until I started digging down and actually studying. And what it was God was telling them that don't go to Asia, and he pretty much just took them and rerouted them, just like some of the GPSs. They rerouted them to a place that he wanted to go. And Paul, he said okay, and he listened. And he could have just said, no, I'm going to continue doing what I think is right, not what God thinks is right. And like I said, God had stopped Paul and their others' plan on what they were going to do. This time it wasn't other leaders or other ones who wanted him. He hadn't stopped to where he was going, and then, like I said, and rerouted him. And I mean, who knows what was in Asia? Wait for him. I mean, I think of that too. I mean, there's also an aspect of why God led them away from there. I mean, I'm sure Paul probably didn't exactly know why at the time. I mean, he obviously seen that vision. I mean, why do you think God said no to preach in Asia?
He wasn't ready to open that door for him to preach there in Asia.
But he did later.
Yes.
They went later.
Yes. Yeah. I'll definitely get into that. Yeah, they do later, and he does take him to Europe there and preach there. But just at this point, the Holy Spirit told him not to go. And that was just a thought I thought of too. I was like, I wonder why.
I'm wondering if God had wanted him to wait so he could do a work on the people of Asia, their hearts.
And that very well could be. I mean, some of God's planning, we just may never know the reason behind it, but it's God's plan. I mean,
God's timing is so different from our timing. And so as a Christian, you just have to learn. You've got to follow the leadership of the Lord and the Spirit and do what God leads you to do and plant the seed. And it might not even be in your time that something comes from that. But you can't get weary in well-doing. And I think a lot of someone like Paul that was really in depth in what he was doing, he understood that pretty well. But a lot of younger ministers might not. They might not took that route. But that's learning, to follow the leadership and do what God tells you to do. And you might not see the results at that time. And you can't let that discourage you, I guess is what I'm saying.
yeah, that's true. I mean, he could have just, especially if he's, a newer minister, or just kind of, I'm kind of, well, I'm just gonna go there, I guess, or so be it then. I mean, definitely, I think, in God's timing and God's plan, we may not see the right in front of us, or even, 100 feet in front of us. We may not see the end result, but I mean, ultimately, you will eventually. I mean, that's where you just got to pray and to really just trust in the Lord, and eventually, you'll understand of what pieces were put together when they were put together. Like I said, God's timing is the best timing. We may not understand it or like it, but it's ultimately, the right timing.
You're talking about a huge area that was thoroughly entrenched in Buddhism and all those other isms and things. God knew that Paul needed to train up and sow the seeds to many missionaries that would go into that area, and it wouldn't be fair for him as just a couple of people going into the area. It would work so much better with others being well trained in the Word of God.
Yeah. I think there's some questions here that Paul and his partners may have thought of. Jesus, didn't you tell us to make disciples of all nations? Don't you want to reach multiple cultures who will then take the gospel with them and when they return home? And why are you preventing us to saying anything about you in this region? I mean, I definitely think there was probably some questions there and some discussions between them. I mean, ultimately they trusted the Lord, which is the right decision there. But I mean, I would be asking kind of why. I mean, if this is already kind of our mission to do, this is what we thought was best. I mean, it's ultimately what God thinks is best. But yeah, I would definitely have questions myself if I was in Paul's shoes back then.
Can't go wrong on the Word of God.
No, you can't. No, you can't. when has God closed doors of opportunity and led you in a different direction? Anybody got an example or want to take a stab at that one? For me, I think it could possibly like be job related too. I mean, when you're in one job aspect and things aren't just jiving or not adding up, and maybe something comes open, or somebody mentions something to you, and something kind of tells you, hey, to go in this direction, and ultimately, it's a good thing. You just maybe didn't think of it right then and there, but you see why. Then you take a step back, and once you maybe get that new job, you kind of think, okay, well, maybe that's why I was having all these, issues, or just kind of things that maybe you just didn't like, and then just led up to something blossoming, something different.
Ours was when we made the big move change. When we were young, Tim and I were young, with 2 kids moving from a big city up to here. We never have ever regretted it, and we knew this is where God wanted us to be.
I think everybody can kind of relate to that at one point or another. Doors have been closed and other ones have been open, and you may not see it like right then and there, but maybe sitting back reflecting and maybe just even praying about it. I mean, you kind of see, okay, this is where the Lord wants me to go, or this is what the Lord has done for me. And especially this time of year, that's kind of something to be thankful about and thankful for. It says, aren't you grateful for the Holy Spirit's guidance? Jesus works through the Holy Spirit to reveal just enough of His plan to get us to take the next step with Him. He closes and opens doors to guide us to where He wants to work. We don't always understand these changes. We may not like what's happening, but His no is always given to us. But His no is always given to get us to His yes. Just like in this situation with Paul, I mean, him saying no in Asia, I mean, ultimately, like y'all said before, they end up going to Asia and do end up preaching there and spreading the gospel there, but just the timing was in the Lord's timing. How do you determine God's leading as you seek His will?
You're at peace with your decision. There's no conflict. You don't feel no stress about it.
Yeah, I feel like if you let the Lord lead and help you make your decisions, I think it's going to be an easier decision to make. I think if you're sitting there kind of contemplating a lot, I mean, which we all do, like you said, you won't have as much peace with it. I feel like, but maybe you pray or you dive into the Word, and you'll get some form of peace or some form of maybe just spoken to, what you need to do or which way you need to go. Does anybody have anything to add on the second set of verses, and any questions, comments, or anything? We'll go over to our last set of verses, and we'll see here of Paul and some his group of people. They're going to meet a lady named Lydia, and ultimately what is going to happen for them and happen for her. And I think this will play kind of a big part of why exactly they didn't go to where they were supposed to, where they wanted to go in the beginning. I think the good Lord had a plan all in place that Paul and his partners there are gonna to see. Therefore, losing from Troas, we came with a straight course to Samothracia, and the next day to Neapolis, and from thence to Philippi, which is the chief city of that part of Macedonia, and a colony. And we were in the city abiding certain days. And on the Sabbath, we went out of the city by a riverside where prayer was wont be to be made. And we sat down and spake unto the women which resorted thither. And a certain woman named Lydia, a seller of purple, of city of Thyatira, which worshiped God, heard us, whose heart the Lord opened, and she attended unto these things which were spoken of Paul. And when she was baptized and her household, she besought us, saying, If ye have judged me to be faithful to the Lord, come to my house and abide there. And she constrained us. And here we see them, getting into Macedonia, where he had the vision and the dream, and more specifically, I guess it's Philippi. I think I don't know if I'm saying that correctly. But once they got there, Paul and others were trying to, they're just kind of sticking to what they were known best, of trying to meet at the synagogue where the Jews were, but in this city, Rome's presence and the Romans were very overrun there, and then they didn't have a synagogue, and it probably was because of, in here in the book it says that they kind of told the Jews to vacate. Like I said, they wanted to begin a synagogue, but there wasn't one, and it says here, and later in Acts 18 verse 2, about the Romans telling the Jews to vacate. So, I mean, that's probably, I think of maybe why they didn't have a synagogue at the time. I'm not wholeheartedly, sure on that. I mean, Lonnie, do you have maybe anything you think about that, or maybe why they didn't have a synagogue in place there? And so once they got there, they heard about a group meeting down at the river and praying and meeting there, and so that's where they started there to see where could they go from there, where could they spread it. So they heard of the place, and they went by the river outside, and I think, and looking at this, I mean, God knew, probably knew of this, and putting them in the path of Lydia and these others that are down there by the river, and them in Paul's path. I think they Lord just there's a reason why they didn't go to Asia, and I think this is one reason why, maybe, that these specific little group of people needed to hear about Jesus and about the Word, and to start that there. And so, and it's probably Paul, I guess, in his fellows there going into it, probably didn't really think that, probably didn't know what much was going to happen once they got there. I mean, yeah, he had that vision, but ultimately was kind of going in blind, I think, is the aspect of it. I mean, they were already trying to go what they knew best, was already going to a synagogue. Well, they already didn't have one there. I mean, so that was already something new for them to overcome. And who they spoke to included Jews and Gentiles, and some women there at the river. And Lydia is said to have been a God-fearing woman. I mean, she ultimately may have not heard about Jesus, but she knew about God, and she just didn't know the gospel like Paul is going to be teaching and trying to spread throughout the land there and the different parts. And God ultimately opened her heart there, as it says in, let's see, I think it's verse 15, and when she was, part of 14, sorry, the Lord opened that she attended unto these things which were spoken to Paul. The Lord ultimately opened her heart to the words that Paul spoke, and she actually, listened and became a believer. And it says that she had been baptized. And further on in Acts, it won't be in this lesson, but further on, her house was a meeting place for a lot of Christians over the next period of time, that she used her home as a meeting place for different Christians and different people. And and one little fun fact that I've seen here is Lydia was actually from Asia. I mean, ultimately, Paul was supposed to not go to Asia, but yet the Lord opened a way for somebody from Asia to actually have heard the gospel. It says we discovered that Lydia was a businesswoman from Thyatira in Asia. I thought that was pretty interesting. That in the beginning, God forbid them to go to Asia and to spread the word, but yet Lydia here, being from Asia, actually got to hear the word. Anybody have any comments or anything so far from this little set of verses? Anything I want to add?
Well, Paul would have known then that people in Asia were ready to hear about the Word of God and about Jesus.
I think so. I think that was also just like a seed that he planted.
Opening door for him.
I think it was a seed that he planted. I mean, even her whole household, I don't know if her whole household was from Asia or what that consisted of, but I feel like that's just, one little seed that's been planted and just kind of knows, okay, well, we've got one here, where could this, maybe take us? And I thought it was very cool to see that. I mean, like I said, this is something that was just kind of last minute, just a change of play there for Paul and his group of where they were going and what they were doing.
I was doing a study on Acts and Luke, and they were talking, and Paul, we were talking about that seed, that mustard seed is more or less common for us would be kudzu, and it just spreads. And basically that's what happened with the gospel. It spread just like kudzu will overtake everything.
Yeah. And I think too, I think of the thing of, Jesus will leave the 99 to save the one sheep, and I feel like in this situation that kind of was an example. What I had thought of was, who knows how many people they could have reached to in Asia at the time. I don't know, the circumstances or what the country was, or what they were like then. But they just planted that one seed, that one.
God opened the door for him right there.
Yeah, I think that was a good example of I had come to thought of that whenever I was studying that, and I thought that was a good example. I mean, what do y'all think Paul and the others thought in this moment when they got there and they witnessed to Lydia? What do y'all think they had thought? I mean, I feel like they could probably maybe see some of the Lord's plan in action. I think maybe it wasn't so obvious right then, but I think maybe they said, okay, this is why we had come here. This is why the Lord told us not to go to Asia and to come here. Because one, they didn't even have a church or a synagogue there in the beginning at all. And so they were pretty much starting from the ground up. And then now they've planted a seed with Lydia in her house, and they've been baptized, and what they will be able to do to spread. And I mean, what we do for Christ matters. I feel like each of our actions and going through life is what God's wanting us to do. Whether that's a big thing for me is teaching Sunday school. I think that's something the Lord's put into works for me to be able to come up here and to do it. Something I wouldn't even thought of in time before. And I think different doors opening at different times. We see it. Okay, this is what the Lord wants, and we need to listen to Him. We need to do what we need to do for Christ, and what we do for Him. It actually matters. Who knows what would have happened if they went to Asia? You know what I mean? They could have, met a lot of roadblocks, as you say, of how Paul's, trips before being, threatened and just kind of, almost murdered. Who would have known? God may have spared him from some disaster in Asia if to go here. Who knows what would have been waiting for him. And I thought was something cool here that I read. Since Paul obeyed, eventually his travels took to Europe, and that's why we've had the gospel for not 2,000 years. You know, who knows what would have happened and what the Lord would have kind of sent him on. And like I said, you know, ultimately God several people saved and several seeds sown and different ones there.
Well, it doesn't tell us exactly how many others in her family spread the word to their family then. And it just kept, they were eager for Paul to come.
I feel like they probably would, but you never know. And then once that one seed's planted, who knows how many they would touch, you know, how many people they would have spread. Yeah, I mean, and who knows if Lydia still has family in, you know, Asia at the time, or even travels there. I mean, it did say in this lesson, and I mean, she could have went back there and ultimately kind of planted the seed too, or any of her family there that was in her house.
It's likely that they would have listened to one of their own more than they would have all a stranger.
Definitely. I mean, I feel like that's a big thing to think of. Yeah, I mean, if you listen to somebody you know of, you're going to listen to somebody you really know, and not just a stranger. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, I'm sure people obviously were listening to Paul too, but yeah, that's a good point, Lonnie. Does anybody have anything they'd like to add on the last set of verses, or any comments?
Well, we know from this whole story the amazing result of this small beginning, because the church in Philippi grew tremendously because we have the book of Philippians. If Paul had disobeyed the agenda and the timing and the direction of the Lord and gone off to Asia, he probably would have been killed, or possibly, who knows. But what we do know is that he went by the leading, the timing, and the agenda of God, and one lady and her house got saved. But from that mustard seed of faith became the church of Philippi, which was so big, later in life, Paul Paul determined to write a letter because there were so many Christians. And we now, 2,000 years later, have the book of Philippians. And how many people have come to Jesus because of the book of Philippians? And the book of Philippians' subtitle is the book of joy. From this event, we have the Church of Philippi, and we have one thing Christians have over the world is we have joy. The world is selling their soul for happiness. And when you search for happiness, you never get it. Because no matter how much you have to make you happy, it's never enough.
Amen.
Because blessed are those who hunger and thirst after righteousness. They shall find joy and happiness and fulfillment and peace and God, and they'll find their true self. So from this little encounter at the river, whoa, what has God given us?
Yeah, definitely. It just goes to show you what little bit of witnessing, or a little bit of just speaking about, you know, Jesus and about the gospel, what that impact could be, or what that would lead to. You just may never know of what somebody might listen to or take hold of and eventually spread it. I thought it was definitely a good story to diving into it and understanding it. Yeah. Does anybody else have anything they'd like to add? Or?
And also from the book of Revelations, we know that there was a church at Thyatira. It wasn't perfectly recommended, but there was a church there where Lydia was from. So somehow a church was established there.
Mhm.
I may never know how it came to be. It could be from this little bit of witnessing, or it could have been something else. But it just opens the door to a lot of opportunity. But I believe that's all I've got for you guys this morning. Unless y'all got anything else to add, but it was great learning about this and researching and really studying it. But yeah, that's all I've got. So thank y'all.
Thank
Thank
you.
you very much.